On the night Daniel decided he wouldn't see another sunrise, a bulldog waited in the rain and stared at the diner door. The dog's head was too big for his body, his underbite a stubborn little shelf against the weather, his red collar dulled with age. He didn't bark or whine. He simply watched, as if he had been sent to keep count of the breaths a man still had left inside. Daniel stirred his coffee with the handle of a spoon because the bowl had snapped off years ago, and he'd never bothered to replace it. He was 46, a decade older in the joints. His flannel stuck to his shoulders. The waitress had called him hun and topped him off 3 times without meeting his eyes. It was the sort of kindness that refuses to ask questions it can't carry home. The storm dragged a sleeve over the windows. The open sign clicked and hummed. Daniel's phone lay face down by the creamer, a hairline crack across its case, his life divided neatly by that line. Before the accident and after, he had worked all day at the shop on the edge of town, changing oil for people who'd started saying they couldn't afford synthetic. He'd thought it tonight, just thought it like a stray spark, and the thought had landed somewhere dry and tender. He could drive to the river. The guardrail at mile marker 12 had never fully recovered from the snowplow in 19. Everybody knew it, but when he pushed back his chair, when the bell above the door gave its small silver protest and the wet air climbed into his lungs, the bulldog rose from the mat and looked at him like a boulder looks at a river, steady, in the way things older than you are steady. "Hey, buddy," Daniel said, because a person will talk to anything if it gives them an excuse to keep standing. The dog's ears twitched. He leaned forward and bumped Daniel's leg with his head. The collar tag was a small metal paw. Beneath it, a second tag. "Lou, Lou," Daniel said, as if saying the name might yank a tether tight around him. The dog's breath was warm. His eyes were the muddy green of pond water, flecked with amber. In them, Daniel did not see pity. He saw a job. Someone had tied Lou's leash to the railing. A good knot, but not cruel. A soggy cardboard sign leaned against the railing's post letters, fattened by rain. "Please, good boy, I can't." Daniel's throat closed, the kind of closing that scrapes on the way down. "Yeah," he said softly. "I can't either." He untied the leash. The waitress, who had no business hearing anything a man said to a dog in the rain, stepped outside anyway. "I've been feeding him scraps for 2 hours," she said, tugging her plastic rain hood tighter. "Run of the kitchen. He won't go with anyone." Her eyes landed on them, on the creature and the man. "You two look like you're already headed the same direction." Daniel nodded without knowing why he was nodding. He opened the passenger door of his pickup. Lou climbed in with a grunt, circled once, and sat like he'd been practicing for this on every porch he'd ever waited on. The river wasn't an option anymore. The river was a rumor people told about a different kind of night. Daniel's house had the kind of quiet that made sound echo one toothbrush clacking against one sink, one plate drying in a rack that ought to be sold in multiples. The hallway was a gallery of almosts. A baseball schedule magnet held up a child's art project in faded marker. "My favorite animal is a turtle." The turtle had 5 legs. Once, Daniel had praised the ambition. A year later, he could not bring himself to correct it. Lou snorted his approval of the living room rug and shook himself like a small, solemn earthquake. He explored with the deliberate care of someone who knows the rules but not where they're posted. A water dish appeared. A blanket. The couch gave up a cushion. Daniel found kibble in a canister under the sink left over from a foster he'd returned a month early because he couldn't manage the little creature's night terrors. He felt the old shame glance off his ribs. He put the bowl down anyway. Lou ate as though the world might be kind after all. He paused twice to check the room, then kept eating. His tale was a corkscrew comma that could not find the sentence it belonged to. When they were done pretending not to need each other, Daniel sat on the edge of the couch and patted the cushion. "Come on." Lou hesitated, then hauled himself up, a grunt and a softness landing together. Rain stitched the windows. The furnace clicked awake. The television stayed dark. His name was Tyler. Daniel said after a long time, like a person who'd been holding his breath underwater and had finally discovered how to breach. Lou didn't move. He breathed. That was enough. We were coming back from his friend's house. Daniel smiled without looking at anything. He was making up a song about French fries, and it was real bad, and I told him he better practice if he wanted to be famous. He said, "I don't want to be famous. I want to be loud." He stared past the mantle, past the paint. I looked down at the dash for 1 second. 1 second was more than the universe needed. He pressed his knuckles into his eyes hard enough to see comets. When he dropped his hand, Lou pushed his forehead into Daniel's chest and left it there, like a door held open with a shoulder dot. The clock in the hallway gave its polite announcement of midnight. In the space that followed, Daniel surprised himself by thinking of the morning. They learned each other's weather. Lou was a patient storm. He had the dignity of a grandfather and the moral flexibility of a raccoon. He would not steal a sandwich unless you forgot you were eating it. He did not bark at the mailman. He saved his voice for trucks that rattled too loud. He did not chase squirrels. He watched them with the skeptical tolerance of a union rep observing management. He also snored like a small motorboat tied to a dock. Daniel moved through days with the new arithmetic of 2. He said "we" the first time by accident, when the lady at the hardware store asked if he wanted a bag. "We're good," he said, and blinked. He made lists in a notebook he found in a kitchen drawer. Call insurance had lived there for a year. Kicked down the page every week by smaller things: milk, stamps, rotate tires. He didn't add "stay" because it felt like jinxing the way you look at a hawk and say "hawk" out loud and it flies away. But he stayed. In the mornings, they walked the loop around the high school track. The town had stopped locking it after 2 budget meetings and 1 public outcry. Lou's nails clicked on the lane lines. The bleachers remembered all the voices they used to hold. They'd pass the memorial tree near the gate every day. The one with the brass plate that read, "For Tyler," who was loud. Someone had added a sticker of a turtle and nobody had removed it. Sometimes there were fresh flowers. Sometimes a little stone painted like a baseball. Sometimes a folded note weighted with a quarter. The notes were for the living. "I know," Daniel would say, not sure whether he was speaking to his son or to the voice that told him to keep moving his feet. Lou would sit, wag, and wait until the moment passed. The way a good friend waits for your laughter to find you again after it loses its keys. On the 10th morning, a girl in a hoodie and pajama pants shuffled onto the track with a clarinet case and the Dauntless. Misery of a teenager at 6 a.m., she noticed the Bulldog and her face opened like a door. "Can I?" she asked, already crouching. Lou submitted himself to worship with a sigh. "What's his name?" she asked. "Lou," Daniel said. "Hi, Lou," she whispered into his ears, and the word carried the ache of a great many days she did not say. She scratched behind his collar and found the perfect spot. Because teenagers are better at paying attention to the right things than anyone gives them credit for. She looked up at Daniel like she was surfacing. "You come here every day?" He almost said, "We're trying." Instead, "Yeah." She nodded, as if he'd confessed something and she'd decided not to press charges. "Cool," she said. "See you." She walked to the 50-yard line, put her case down, and played her scales into the empty metal of morning. The notes were thin but sure. Lou cocked his head. Daniel felt the music like a letter addressed to resident. When they passed the gate again, a woman he recognized from the grocery store stood by Tyler's tree with a paper cup of coffee in both hands. She had the fragile kind of smile that blew sideways in a breeze. "Your boy liked my cinnamon rolls," she said. "He used to trade the corner piece for the middle one because he said corners made him feel like cereal commercials. It should have wrecked him. It didn't, not all the way." "He was loud," Daniel said, "because it felt important that the world be reminded." She nodded at the plate and then at Lou. "So's he," she said. Lou, unabashed, snorted. Work was a raft. Keep your hands busy, and your hands will keep you. The shop was a rectangular room that smelled like the underside of something. Men and women from all around town came to hand over their keys and their small talk. They paid in gratitude, in pie, in lemons from an uncle's tree. Some of them didn't pay until next month. Most of them did. If a man is valued for making things run that no one else understands, grief quietly writes him into the town's circulatory system. Lou became the shop's unofficial union. He conducted inspections of the waiting bench with his chin. He lay on his side in a square of dust, as if discovering a new continent. Children crawled on him, and he bore it like a saint. Once, a woman cried on a Tuesday about a transmission and a husband, and Lou pressed his paw to the top of her shoe as if to say, "Contracts can be renegotiated." She laughed through her tears, and a moment like that is a kind of paycheck in the afternoons. Daniel wrote letters he never mailed. He wrote them at the small table by the back door, the one that looked out over the alley where teens skateboarded and old men nodded at whether they pretended to predict. He wrote to Tyler about oil weights, and about the clarinet girl, and about the small ways boys keep living inside rooms they have left, how the house still smelled faintly of strawberries when the sun heated the kitchen floor at noon, how his baseball glove sat in its place like it was holding a spot in line. Sometimes he didn't write at all. He put his palm on the paper and listened to his blood. It was enough to remember he had some dots spring arrived, like someone had found an old box fan and plugged it in. The town's parade was the kind that could be gathered in a spare moment. A fire truck no one would let go above 10 miles per hour. 2 tractors with flags on their roll bars, a float made of flatbed and faith. Lou wore a red bandana and a pair of foam antlers left over from Christmas because a child insisted. He suffered both with dignity. Daniel took pictures on his phone and then didn't look at them, which is a whole language for people like him. At the parade, people saw Daniel, not just his outline. They saw his face, the way grief had carved new lines into it that did not make him less handsome. He didn't know what to do with being seen. He shook hands and nodded and smiled like a man who has relearned the choreography after sitting out a song. An older man in a blue cap with his ship's name stitched across the front cornered him at the lemonade stand. "You still doing small engines?" he asked. "Sometimes," Daniel said. "I got a generator that sounds like it's gargling rocks. I'll take a look." The man stuck his chin at Lou, who was watching a toddler attempt to eat a balloon. "Good dog," he said. He hesitated, thumb rubbing the brim of his cap. I had a buddy, he said. After the war, he started over. Some dogs get medals. Some get to live in kitchens and teach you how to sit still. Daniel nodded. Yeah, the man said, like they'd both just signed a thing they didn't need to read. When summer came, the heavy kind, the kind that put its full hand on your back and asked you to slow down, the river filled with the green smell of everything it had touched. Daniel parked at the trailhead and stood with his hand on the hood of the truck like it might read his pulse. No swimming, he told Lou, who looked at him with the blank courtesy of someone who doesn't speak English but is very good at reading room. They followed the dirt down to where the river widened and slipped around a stand of cottonwoods. Families spread blankets. A couple argued softly and made up, soft arguing being a local sport. Kids threw rocks the way kids always throw rocks, like letters tossed at a door to see who will answer. A boy waded in too far because boys do. A slick patch of algae did what slick patches do. The river took his feet. It's remarkable how fast a man can move when he's already spent the worst of himself. Daniel's boots were off before his heart could argue. The water was colder than the green promised. He didn't see the boy's face at first. He saw an arm, a little brown thing slapping at the air. He went toward it because there was nowhere else to go. Lou, stay, he said, and a dog, miracle. Marvel stayed. Daniel's hands found fabric and a shoulder and something sharp that turned out to be a toy shark. He yanked. The river thought about it. It is very hard to argue with a river, but grief had left him with a particular kind of strength. The muscles you build carrying something you cannot put down. He hauled the boy toward the shallows, found gravel with his knees, and stood. Good Lord, he stood, with a child pressed to his chest. The boy coughed and cried at once. His mother's hands were everywhere. Somebody clapped and then stopped, embarrassed, as if applause were an insult to survival. Daniel blinked the river out of his eyes. On the bank, Lou watched him with the incandescent attention of a creature who knew the stakes without any briefing. When Daniel stepped onto the grass, Lou leaned against his leg like a brace. The boy's mother kissed Daniel's hand. He tried to pull it away and failed. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you, thank you." He wanted to say it was nothing, but it was not nothing. It was the everything that you do when fate passes you a rope. By the time he got to the truck, his hands were shaking hard enough that he had to sit. Lou climbed into his lap without asking, because no one had ever needed permission less. Daniel pressed his forehead to Lou's head and laughed. It burst out of him like a tire's first breath after a patch. He laughed until he cried, and then he cried until he was quiet, which is one of the oldest songs people sing on the ride home. He told Lou, "You stayed," and Lou, who had absolutely considered a heroic belly, pretended he had always been the sort of dog who obeyed emergency orders. They drove with the windows down. The world smelled like cottonwood and wet rock and summer that would someday forgive you for not making the most of it. There are days the world will not ask heroics from you. It will hand you a grocery list and a traffic light that finally turns green and a neighbor who needs jumper cables. You will sit on your porch when the sun slides down the back steps and realize you have not thought about how to end the day even once. Those are the days you keep in your pocket like a stone. You rub in church. There were still nights when the house knelt hard on Daniel's chest. He would wake at 3:17 a.m. and listen to the refrigerator hum like a stubborn friend. He would walk the hallway and stop in the doorway to Tyler's room and breathe carefully around the ache. He would not step inside. He would not turn on the light. He would go back to bed and let Lou mold himself against the line of his spine, and he would breathe with the dog's breath until morning softened the window's edge. He did one brave thing. He fixed the bike. Tyler's bike had leaned against the garage wall for 2 years, like a sentence that trailed off. One Saturday, Daniel rolled it into the daylight and set it on a stand. He took it apart with reverence. He cleaned the chain. He replaced the cable housing. He rewrapped the bars with red tape that matched nothing in the world except the memory of his kids' favorite shoes. When he was done, the bike shone with a quiet pride that did not announce itself. He put it by the door. The next morning, he wheeled it to the high school track and leaned it against Tyler's tree. He wrote a note that said "Free for a kid who likes the middle piece of cinnamon rolls," and taped $1 to it for luck. He sat on the bleachers with Lou and waited. A boy came with his mother, and then another, and then a girl who ran her hand along the top tube like she was making a promise. She looked at the note the way people read headstones, so gentle you could hardly see it. "Can I?" she asked, to the air. "Yes," Daniel said, and the word felt like water. She rode 3 laps, hair lifting, legs sure. When she braked in front of the tree, she put her hand over the brass plate and closed her eyes a second, then hopped off and stood awkwardly in that way people stand when they've been given something that fits. "Thank you," she said. "You're welcome," Daniel replied, and had to swallow against the sudden rush of it. He liked to be loud. "So do I," she said, almost apologetically. "Good," he said. "Good." She rode away, and the bike took the corner like it had a future in the fall. The diner put pie on the menu again, because you cannot call it a diner without pie. The waitress, same woman, same gentleness, brought Daniel an extra napkin because she had learned. He was the sort of man who would use one without noticing and then wish he still had it. Lou took his place under the table and put his chin on Daniel's boot. When the bell above the door rang, a woman stepped in with the tight smile of someone who has made a decision that might undo her. She looked around, saw Lou, and stopped as if she had found a lost photograph, alive and breathing. Daniel stood up before he knew he was standing. The woman approached slowly, hands out in the useless, grateful way hands go out toward things we have no right to expect back. "Is that?" she began, and her voice broke. "He was at this door," Daniel said, gesturing to the stoop outside. "In the rain." With a note, she closed her eyes. "I wrote it," she said. "I'm sorry. I'm my apartment. My job fell through, and my sister said she'd take him. But then the words tumbled and refused the neatness of sentence structure. I stopped here because I didn't know what else to do. He loves French fries." She half laughed. "Shame and love braided. I left him because I thought someone would love him more than I could if I kept trying." Lou thumped his tail once, very hard, as if to say, "We can hold more than one truth at a time." He sniffed her hand and then licked the heel of her palm with the restraint of a gentleman. "I'm Daniel," he said. "Marisol," she replied, and wiped at her face with the heel of her other hand. "I've come every week, just to see if anyone." She let the sentence unfurl and drift. "He's been teaching me how to breathe," Daniel said. She let out a sound that might have been a laugh but wasn't. "He taught me how to stop running," she said. "I just couldn't keep up." They sat. The waitress poured coffee, and the 3 of them made a small geography of second chances. Marisol told stories of Lou eating precisely 3 blueberries every morning, and then refusing the 4th as if to prove a point about moderation. She described how he liked to sit on a pillow like a man on a throne and consider the room. She had pictures. In one, Lou wore a paper crown. In another, he slept with a child's stuffed turtle under his chin. Tyler liked turtles. Daniel said, and then said it again because saying it didn't break anything. He liked to be loud. Marisol put her hand on the table and did not move it away when Daniel put his over it. There are times when hands are more honest than words. I can't take him back, she said carefully. Not now. She looked out at the grey parking lot, at the blue of it all. I'm starting again. New job, new place, 2 buses and a walk. But I wanted to know if he was okay. If I did the most selfish thing and somehow it ended up being the kindest. You did what you could with what you had, Daniel said. He felt the truth of it land between them and settle. He's home. Her shoulders dropped. Good boy, she whispered, and Lou, who was not immune to praise in any language, closed his eyes and sighed before she left. Marisol kneeled and pressed her forehead to Lou's. 10,000 quiet mornings, she said. That's what I wish you, old man. After she was gone, the waitress refilled their mugs and said, to no one and to them, Amen. Winter returned like a story you know by heart, but tell anyway because telling it makes you human. Daniel and Lou learned new routes through the days, through the small errands, through the rooms that shoes remember. On Sundays, Daniel joined a grief group that did not call itself a grief group. They met at the library and pretended to discuss a book. They were very persuasive about pretending. Lou lay at their feet like a comma, letting sentences rest. On Christmas Eve, Daniel wrote one more letter he didn't mail. He wrote it at the kitchen table while the furnace hummed and the tree blinked its set of stubborn, mismatched lights. He wrote to Tyler, Hey, kiddo, you said you wanted to be loud. You still are. Not in the way I thought. You're loud in the way quiet can be loud, how a morning can ring in your chest if you stand in it and listen. We saved a kid at the river. He coughed up half the county and then yelled about it, which felt right. There's a girl riding your bike fast enough to tilt the world. There's a clarinet player who's getting better. There's a woman who loved a dog and let him go the way you let go of Kitesard and on purpose. There's a man who still forgets he put the coffee mug in the microwave and then finds it like a second sunrise. I thought I was done. Not done like a race, done like a candle. I'm not. I think that's your fault. I think you left me a bulldog. Love you, loudly. He folded the letter and tucked it into the box with the turtle drawing and the old field day ribbon and the baseball schedule magnet with the week he hated because they'd lost 3 in a row. He turned off the kitchen light and the tree made the room glow in the way old things glow. Not brighter, just truer. Lou lifted his head from the couch and squinted like an old sea captain. Daniel whistled. Lou hopped down, his joints clicking, his body insisting on one more leap than the math allowed. He came and sat in front of Daniel, who scratched the secret spot behind his left ear until Lou made a noise he made only for the people he had decided to keep. 10,000 quiet mornings, Daniel said. Lou sneezed, which in Bulldog means absolutely. Outside, the town's one set of church bells counted the hour. Snow began, patient and unhurried. Inside, a man and a dog breathed the same air and called it peace. And in the silence that followed, which held everything that had been lost and everything that had not, Daniel realized the simplest, most secular benediction a man can come to: stay. Maybe the miracle isn't thunder or trumpets. Maybe it's this: a man, a dog, and one more morning. If Daniel and Lou say anything, it's this: stay. Stay through the small hours, the awkward phone call, the coffee that goes cold while you listen. Stay long enough for the quiet to get loud again. Tonight, if this story found you, check on one person you've been meaning to text. If a four-legged friend pulled you back from an edge, tell us how in the comments. Your words might be the rope someone else grabs. And if you can, adopt, foster, or support your local shelter. The next Lou is waiting under a leaky awning somewhere. If the line 10,000 quiet mornings rang true, type stay below so someone scrolling at 2 a.m. says it and stays too. Subscribe for the next chapter of Daniel and Lou. And share this with the one person who needs a small reason to choose tomorrow. Stay, that's the whole sermon.